Not so fast. We can't sing that fast.
I tried. That's
Okay.
all I can do.
Where's these lights at? Greg, where's these lights at?
Man,
It's not for me, it's for Ted. He can't see his lesson. I don't really care, but I know Ted does. Thank you, Ted.
I can't see.
Gosh. Listen. Yeah, it helps a little bit. My hope is made on nothing less. No. I'm going to try. It's a little harder to do at the piano because I don't know how to start too high or too low, and then I run out of breath or breathing room either, or scraping the ceiling or digging gravel. So number 315 is what I'll try first. The first one and the last one. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in him be found, dressed in his righteous. Oh, wait. Dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the congregation. On Christ's solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. And Greg even for free threw in some harmony. That's not. Number 342. And wait a minute. Jesus is all the world to me, my life, my joy, my all. He is my strength from day to day. Without him I would fall. When I am sad, to him I go. No other one can cheer me so. When I am sad, he makes me glad. He's my friend. Jesus is all the world to me. I want no better friend. I trust him now, I trust him when life's fleeting days shall end. Beautiful life with such a friend, beautiful life that has no end. Eternal life, eternal joy. He's my friend.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate that. Appreciate him singing. You don't want me leading singing, that's for sure. Not a thrill.
I can teach
Well, that'd be all right too. Teach the history that I miss. That works. Good evening. Welcome winter. Yeah, anybody see pictures of snow on top of Beach Mountain and Rome Mountain and places like that? Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the way it works. Imagine that. The trees probably change color now. Everybody got their list, their prayer list, so we can drag those out. Let's see. Hospital, we've got, I guess Rebecca Pure is still at JCMC. George Williams still at VA. And I know Carl Lee is now in Franklin Woods. Anybody heard update on Carl? Okay. Hope he does well. The complications from surgery is never fun. Okay.
Tommy Smith, I don't know if we have Tommy on there.
He's on special request.
Special request, okay. Well, I can update you now. Anyway, this is what Carol told me everything. She said, Tommy Smith had a setback, had some bleeding, but he's doing okay. He went back to Vanderbilt today for a recheck.
Okay. Yeah, remember he had a renal transplant. Okay. Under the special request, we mentioned Tommy. We have the search for the minister, Eugene and Debbie Davis, Jamie Vines. We mentioned Tommy Smith, Bob Lyles, Jim Fretwell, Rod and Kim Ashby. And Mona wanted to add under special request to remember to pray for a good outcome from all the elections that's coming up. It's only a few weeks away now. And of course, we need to continue praying for the victims of the hurricane, the flood waters and such. It's,
Carol was just now getting over the stomach bug this morning. That's why she
okay. Any other additions to the special request? It was retinas, wasn't it? Yeah. I hope I see everything okay tonight. I saw the ophthalmologist today, and then they lasered part of a scar over one of my what is on the lens that they'd replaced. So that was interesting. Yeah, it wasn't. No, every once in a while there'd be this film, and I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. Yeah, but it's okay. Yeah. Kept ducking. Expectant moms, Haley, Edney. No update there, I guess. Continue going. Not adding any new ones. Nursing home, life care, Helen Height, Jack Howell. The Waters, Ruby Ray, Jerry Nave, Evelyn Collins. Hermitage, Linda Chambers, Betty Jo Montgomery, Perry Perkins, Raymond Crabtree, Margaret Fields. Hillview, Wanda Laws, Mary Tolley. Sycamore Springs, Lulabelle Street. Mountain City, Gene Buchanan, Kyle Bradley, Mike Dellinger. Ivy Hall, Opal Baird, Brenda Stout, Betty James, Ronnie Taylor, Sally Whitehead, Betty Chambers, Barney McKinney, John McKinney, Junior Stalkup, and Bob Rainbow. Signature, Elizabeth Ney, Barbara Hicks, Tammy Wells, and Lake Bridge, Gene Campbell. Any changes there, additions? Hillview, Phil Roberts, okay. Any others?
Mary Tolley turned 103 today.
103. That group's a tough bunch, let me tell you. That's that group that actually, a lot of those survived the Depression, those older folks like that, and they're pretty tough. Yeah. out of the area. Amy for Africa, Terry Cates, Linnell Montgomery, Tommy Brown, Randy and Belinda Baskins, the Barons, the Sumas, and Missy Keith. Any additions or updates on that group? Or Amy for Africa, are they back in Africa now?
No, they're in stateside right now.
They're still in the States, okay. Any other additions? At home, Sean Elliott, Randy Payne, Harold Porteous, Rita Price, Landy Carden, Carmen Yates, Jenny McGee, Travis Oliver, Jack Garrison, Ann Richenberg, Retha Williams, Kay Smith, Kim Miller, Victor Deloach, Betty McNeil, June Bailey, Ruby Odom, Daisy Grindstaff, Mitzi Baker, Bob Holcomb, Brett Hyder, Casey and Emery Fryer, Jamie Buckles, Jeff and Regina Cates, Don and Betty Pritchard, Gene and Craig Schaefer, Charles Carden, Margaret and Mac Hicks, Gary Carden, Leslie Williams, Sherry Huffman, Timbra Wright, Debbie Williams, and Bernadette Andrews. Any updates or additions to the home group?
Kay Smith, Gary said Monday that she was still having quite a bit of pain, but today he said she was a little better.
Doing better. Every day, one more improvement. That's right. That knee stuff's always fun. Any other updates or additions?
Yeah, I have an update on Jean Schaefer. I just found out she had surgery. She didn't tell me what it was, but she just said, I'm okay, and the kids are here helping. So,
Okay. So it was, whatever it was successful.
I guess,
Okay. All right.
she just said she's home.
Okay.
So, I guess that's surgery.
Maybe an outpatient, hopefully. Okay. Under sympathy, we have Rick Norris family, Gayleen Valence family, Dennis Clark family. Any updates or additions?
Her cousin, Jennifer Norris, she's been on there for months or so. She passed away.
Jennifer Norris? Okay. The Jeff Hyder family? Okay. Did you get those? Okay. Any others? We have any special praises tonight?
Our County Men's Fellowship went very well. Despite the fact we didn't know some of the songs and the computer was not talking to the screen.
Just a glitch here and a glitch there.
Yeah, and then the message was powerful.
Good message.
He's getting on up in years.
Aren't we all? You're not? Okay. Quit celebrating birthdays and you're celebrating anniversaries. Yeah, I get it. Okay. It was a good meeting. We did see,
It was almost sleety, almost, when we got out, and,
it was cold, rainy.
it was cold.
And we did see Dwayne there. Yeah. Sat next to Dwayne. He looks good. He's not fishing enough, he said, but he's doing all right. Okay. And people to call on. Anybody remember the elders and the deacons will certainly do if you have requests there. Okay.
You could ask, after Logan leaves for Honduras, and for 10 days, and I guess he'll be on the special request.
On the special request, okay. All right. Any other updates or additions we could think of? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to ask Floyd if he would open us in prayer, please.
Thomas, take a moment there aside. Thank you for everyone. Not here tonight, and just need to not here. So we'll try to move. Heavenly Father, you have blessed us so much today, Lord. We know that seasons are changing, Lord. The season's starting to make today. What Lane said, you give, Father.
Thank you, Floyd.
Ted, I forgot that, I don't know her name, but Candy and John Mandel that sing down there sometimes on Wednesday night, her mother is an IT leader over at Bluefield. But I cannot think of her name, but Janet, I think it's Janet Warwick. So she's an IT at Bluefield.
Okay, be sure to put that on our list then, and, a small group, but, highly intelligent, I think, so. Tonight, yeah, real smart people. Well, we're going to jump into Ecclesiastes again, okay? I know we talked about time last time out of Ecclesiastes. We're going to look at Ecclesiastes a little differently this time. The problem with Ecclesiastes, if you start going through it and it's one of the problems with how people use the Bible in general, is when you start pulling out verses and pieces and reading them and don't take them in context, that can be a problem. And that's what a lot of people do. It's like I said before, when I first started with the very first chapter, the very first verses, verse number 2, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And when you look at that, you think, well, this doesn't sound like it's much fun to read. Actually, meaningless is used, 37 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. However, God is mentioned 40 times. So when you look at this and you try to put it all together, and the book is broken down into several sections, but it's important to look at Ecclesiastes not necessarily as a standalone book, but as a book that reflects a time in the human experience that is different than what we know today. It's as different as it can be. Now, there is some question as to who the author was, but most people agree that it probably was Solomon because of the part of the first verse. It says, the words of the teacher's son of David, king of Jerusalem. Well, there's a whole list of sons of David, but it's probably Solomon. And then a little further over, verse 12, I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I devoted myself to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under heaven. What a heavy burden God has laid on men. So there's other different parts in here in this book which would have written, actually the information would have been written before the time of Solomon. So we know that for him to put this book together, he's going back to actually some stories and some literature, things as ancient Egypt, and as also as ancient Babylon. So the story of Gilgamesh. So he's taken those items and put them in the book of Ecclesiastes. So that pretty well shows us that it probably was Solomon, or at least someone at that period of time, who wrote this book. And so you need to look at it as a book of literature that involves wisdom. And of course, wisdom, the way you get wisdom is through questioning. So you ask questions, and then you try to find the answer. And that's where the wisdom comes from. So when you look at this book, and you read this book, and you look at it a different way, then you can learn from it. But if you just peruse it and pick out things and read them, pretty depressing. So you've got to take the whole book in the context. It's very intellectual. It has different parts of the book, but it has basic wisdom, and it has in it the purpose of life and death and reality of death. That's what it talks about, the fact that everyone faces that. Everyone faces death, and that's part of it. So it's what you do. Now, you've heard this over and over again, and a lot of common quotes or things that are attributed to different people actually come from Ecclesiastes. Of course, the song about time, there's a time for this, there's a time for that, that come from Ecclesiastes. So there's a lot of quotations came from this book, and when taken out of context again, sometimes pretty good, sometimes pretty bad. The book is written in different parts. It talks about intellectual wisdom. That's important. It talks about wealth, and it talks about how bad wealth can be if you use it for the wrong purposes. It actually talks about politics. It talks about how politics are necessary for governance, and how governance is necessary for humans' relationships, but at the same time, you see a lot of bad things in politics. You see a lot of evil people use politics to their own desires. Today, that might be appropriate to pay attention to those things. Okay? And it talks about religion in different ways. But it shows that religion, when used in an attempt to impress God, is useless. Why does God need to be impressed by us? So that it talks about that. And we know that in Jesus' time, when he dealt with the Pharisees, that was a thing that they would do. They were there to impress everyone, and in turn think they were impressing God. So any aspect of it can be used bad or good. It talks about enjoying life. Of course, everybody has heard, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. Okay? So when taken out of context, it sounds like, hedonism. But taken out of context. And then the overriding thing in the book, though, the thing that toward the end of the book, and actually in different places in the book, is the fear of God, understanding that you will be standing before God at some time. And it's the fear of God and keeping his commandments is what life is about. So when we read these different things and we look at these, he's talking about different circumstances that we live through, different things we enjoy, eat, drink, rejoice, do good, live joyful. Some comments are is eat, drink, rejoice, do good, live joyfully with your wife. Fully commit to what you do with your hands. Find above all, fear of God, and keep your eyes on the final judgment. So when everything boiled down to the end of it, keep your eyes on God and realize the Father. Now you got to remember, this is Old Testament. He doesn't have the hope we have. It's a whole different thing. He's working and toiling under the Old Testament, where in the temple. Remember, he built the temple. Okay, and the whole purpose of the temple was God lived there with them, and the purpose of the temple was to sacrifice for the Jewish people. So that's why they did the sacrifices for their sins. So the way you lived, you had to do the sacrifices. So the requirements on that were extremely difficult. If you didn't have much money, you bought a dove. But when you should have had a sheep killed, or a calf, or even a bull. But that's what people had to do. So Solomon's time, he built the temple. The purpose of the temple was actually God's presence in the temple. And the purpose of the whole situation is forgiveness for his people that he has chosen. We don't have to do that. So he's writing about a time where it's very difficult to try to understand how you lived, what you did to get forgiveness. So he's got the Ten Commandments. He understands that, which convicts you of your sin. And then they have all these rules that convicts you. And now you only have this one way to get forgiveness. You don't have that grace unless God gives you the grace that Jesus presented. So it's a very complicated thing. So we're going to jump around a little bit, read a little bit here. So we get, like I told you, sometimes I'll make you feel real depressed and then we'll get over it later. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to start with, in chapter 2, we're going to verse 10. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was a reward for all my labor. Wow. So he labored, and his reward, he took pleasure. How many wives did he have? A bunch. It was said that at the time he built the temple, that his kingdom, his treasury, had 90% of the known gold in the world at that time. Wow. That was incredible. Okay, that's why the Babylonians took it all away, carried it away. So the walls were covered with wood, but the wood was covered with gold leaf in the temple. With just everything, the show dishes, the candelabra, everything was gold. And then it had all these other precious metals in there, and rubies. And then remember, the priest vest had these valuable stones on the. And so at this time, Solomon has accumulated more wealth than can be imagined at this point. So he denied himself nothing. But we'll jump down here to verse 11. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. At chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. So you're talking about somebody who probably was the richest man ever, and may be richer than even Elon Musk today, I don't know. But it was meaningless to him because it was fleeting. Now, I'm going to jump over a little bit more here. We're going to go over, you have to pardon me for doing this because my vision's still not 100%. Verse 17. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? Yet he will have control over all the work into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. How true. How many times have we seen a person who has accumulated great wealth or great prestige or great knowledge, and then when they're gone, that's gone too? How many families have you seen who have split asunder because they wanted to divvy the spoils up of their parents and nobody could agree, instead of accumulating what they had on their own? How many times have you seen one person, one child in the family take excess and do things like that? You see that all the time. So when you spend all this time, a friend of mine, I went to school with him back years ago. I asked him, I said, how are you doing? How are you planning here? You've gone into retirement. You seem to be okay. How are things? What do you plan for the future? He said, well, my plan is to go through everything that I have accumulated so that when I die, my children have to pay for the funeral. I said, really? He said, yes.
He said, I want to make sure that they earn everything on their own, because I did mine. So that's kind of sounds like a philosophy that may work for some people. I'm not sure. But I've known people like that too. As a matter of fact, we've been involved sometime in people when they passed, and yeah, they didn't have no money to pay for their funeral. But so what Solomon is saying here, and this is a man of great wealth, great knowledge, great capabilities, things that it's really hard for us to even understand. And he realized that all this great things he'd done, that when he was gone, it was gone. That was it. And that's what happened. Over time, we know that the whole country split in two, had Israel and Judah. We know that they were invaded. We know that eventually they fell away from the Lord. And maybe it was a great prosperity, because the Jews now are waiting for Messiah to come to put this glory back, is what the Orthodox Jews are looking for, the throne of David. They're looking for someone like Solomon to take over the throne and to make them a great power again. But we know that's not going to happen. So Solomon then, and in his own way, of course, was brilliant in terms of he saw how things were going to go and how things happened. And then that, of course, brings us over to chapter 3, and it's got all the time things. And then I like to read this last part here in chapter 3, verse, read this before, verse 6, let's see, it's verse 18. I also thought, as for men, God tests them so that they may see that they are like the animals. Man's fate is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Man has no advantage over the animal. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows if the spirit of man rises upward, if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better for a man than to enjoy his work, because that is his lot. For who can bring him to see what will happen after him? Are you depressed?
Yeah. He was on a serious down.
Yeah. That makes you pretty depressed. But the part of the purpose of this, though, in terms of being low, he recognizes that we are animals. And being an animal, you have a limited life, like we've talked about before. All we know is what we see here. And I talked about faith the last time, and I talked about how that worked, and I talked about faith in my meditation. So if we lower ourselves, if we totally believe this, and we're just animals, and then people pull this out, they pull this out, and they say, well, you might as well enjoy what you got now, because that's all there is. Well, no wonder people get depressed. If that's all you think that there is. And so, why worry about it? Well, we talk, the other parts of the Bible, of course, don't support that. But the fact that we were created like the animals, the fact that we have, as mammals, the same actually type of DNA that a whale has, shows we're made from the dust of the earth, which is carbon-based. And I don't think God would have explained that very well in the Bible to begin with. Somehow or another, I don't think we would have figured that out at that time. But here's the statement: we were made like the animals, but we're special. So Solomon's talking about, if you look at this as that's the end, you're missing the wisdom. Okay? So we're going to jump over here a little bit. Have any questions? Stop me if you have any questions for this. I know I've got everybody so depressed now. that they probably can't think about it.
You would not be Edward Jones' best friend.
No. Planning for the future. Now, let's see, let me jump around here a little bit. I'm going to go to chapter 7. We're going to read a little bit of that. A good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of death better than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of every man, and the living should take this to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, because a sad face is good for the heart. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure. Does that sound a little bit strange to you? Dichotomy. He uses dichotomy a lot. He uses, on one hand you have this, at the same time you have this. Better living through chemistry. Yeah, I don't know if he needs a Xanax or Wellbutrin. Xanax is, help anxiety, and Wellbutrin makes you, if you're depressed, feel better. And I think you can use a little of both. But the first verse is kind of important. A good name is better than fine perfume. That's kind of important, having a good name. All right, and the day of death better than the day of birth. Okay, I don't get that. Except if you believe in God and you've done what you're supposed to do, and for us, if we've accepted Jesus, then yes, the day of death is better than the day of birth. Okay, in other words, there's way worse things than dying for a Christian. So see how I switched that around and interpreted that a little different. So he's laying these things out. So you got to think about it for a minute. So when you read this, you need to think of it in a different context. We get the opportunity to think of it in the context of Jesus and in the context of what's promised for us. And so I don't know if through his wisdom he thought of this, because he was aware of the predictions for the Messiah, aware of all these things. And I don't know if he was hiding that in here. It was one of the reasons it was picked to go into the Bible, is because of some of these, again, these double meanings, these dichotomies. So you have to think of it in a different manner. So when you go back, hopefully you'll get a chance to go back and read Ecclesiastes a little more than what we're doing tonight. And you have to think of it in a different way. To look at, you think of the time, you want to think of it in the time he's writing it, and then you want to think of it in our opportunities that we know that Christ. And did he know? I don't know.
That's the question that's on my mind.
Was that revealed to him? Yeah.
Just like he kind of foreknew that Jesus was our hope and his blood would cover us, and why are we killing all these animals, kicking the can down the road just to please God? And it's like he had clairvoyance of some sort.
It makes you wonder. He was a wise man. What all did God reveal to him? And that's what he asked for, was for wisdom. So with that wisdom would become foreknowledge of the future. Okay? Yeah. Or it's better than asking the Lord to be rich. Although he ended up rich. Okay? So one part is the time that it was written, and the other part is looking forward to now and how we do it. I'm going to jump over here a little bit, and we're going to jump over to chapter 8. Start off here. Who is like the wise man? Who knows the explanation of things? Wisdom brightens a man's face and changes its hard appearance. Okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. Then we're going to go down a little bit further here, verse 2. Obey the king's command, I say, because you took an oath before God. Do not be in a hurry to leave the king's presence. Do not stand up for a bad cause, for he will do whatever he pleases. Since a king's word is supreme, who can say to him, "What are you doing?" Whoever obeys his command will come to no harm, and the wise heart will know the proper time and procedure. For there is a proper time and procedure for every matter, though a man's misery weighs heavily upon him. Well, he's talking about authority. That's the politics I was talking about. You can have good authority and you can have bad authority. And you've got to pick your time to deal with that. We're kind of dealing with that today, aren't we? In this country, this time. Now, there's people out there who think everything's going fine. These elections that are coming up, it's all about just making a choice. It doesn't matter. And then you pick, maybe you're a one issue voter. Maybe that's the thing that's most important to you. Maybe you don't like this person or you don't like that person. But there's still going to be the king. Whoever gets elected is still going to be in command. So you have to decide how we're going to deal with that, how you're going to live through that. And again, realizing that they're not really all supreme. They are at the moment over us, but God is our supreme leader. Okay? So he's talking about how to live in these things. And it says here, it says, and the wise heart will know the proper time and procedure. Don't be stupid. Pay attention to the government, and maybe you can change it. So he talks about wise, and then he talks about obeying the king. So again, a dichotomy. Okay, and then over in chapter 10, he likes to throw out, of course, he probably wrote Proverbs too. He likes to throw out little bits of wisdom to make you think, little bits of things to make your mind kind of reel a little bit and think about it a little bit. It says, as dead flies give perfume a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left. So even then, had right and left. But what he's saying here, and of course Shakespeare said the same thing, but in a different way. And Julius Caesar, he said, I come not to praise Caesar, but to bury him. The evil that men do lives after them, but the good is often interred with the bones. So what he's saying here, that you can have the best person, the best personality, you can be sweet smelling, but then one thing happens and you're the bottom of the pits.
One bad apple ruins the whole bunch.
Yeah. So he can say, but that's what people remember, is the bad part. But he's talking about a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. How often do you see that? And who in here has not done something that will be considered folly? Well, there's all kinds of folly. So you've lived your life the right 99% of the time, and then that one time, 1% is the folly. And fortunately for us, we can be forgiven for that folly by Jesus. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to jump down to verse 18. I kind of like this. If a man is lazy, the rafters sag. If his hands are idle, the house leaks. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes life merry, but money is the answer for everything. How many truisms can you get in a couple of verses? And the funny paper, Snuffy Smith, it's raining and there's water coming through the roof. And he says, well, the roof's leaking. And then they say, well, when are you going to fix it? Well, I can't fix it now. It's raining. And then the next day it don't rain. So are you going to get it fixed? Well, no, it's not raining now. I'm not getting wet. So that's the way the lazy man works. A
little laziness, and as long as it's, we don't get wet if it's not raining. So it's kind of, and then of course, I guess the alcoholic loves what he says here, and wine makes life merry. But money is the answer for everything. Boy, does our government believe in that. They throw money at everything and see if it sticks. Now, I'm going to finish up here. The last part of the book, we'll go chapter 12. We're going to start with verse, let's see, where am I? Verse 9. Not only was the teacher wise, but also he imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads, their collateral saying like firmly embedded nails, given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. He's referring to himself as the teacher. But everything comes down to this last part here. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. So if you leave out that last bit, when you're studying Ecclesiastes, you miss the whole point of the whole thing. And so we're fortunate when we read this. Again, if you didn't have Christ in view, that'd be pretty depressing, because you can't keep the commandments perfectly. It's hard to do. And so the fact that we can get forgiveness, and you try to do good, but you still mess up, that God's grace is what we're looking for, that you keep God before you and his commandments, realizing that it's almost impossible to do those things, but then we can get forgiveness. And so he was alluded to that way back, and then pulls it all together this last sentence. Talks about being wise. He's the teacher. He's wise. He's told people here how to live, what you're supposed to do, all these different proverbs and how they fit together. He's saying all about this. So listen to what I've said. Listen to these proverbs. Listen to these lessons. Listen to these. But then at the very end, now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. That's why we're here. To fear God and keep his commandments. Because, for God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. And so, and just prior to that, in verse, let's see where I'm at, verse 7, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. So that last chapter is pretty important. So Ecclesiastes, when you got to read it in a couple of different ways to study it. The Proverbs are really, all these things that go back and forth are fun. They're interesting. They're little insights into life. It's kind of like a sitcom in one way. But then you've got the story. You've got the truth. You've got the purpose in it. So if you get a chance to sit down and read some more in Ecclesiastes, it's kind of fun to read through it and think of it in a little different way. But I think you'd enjoy it. So it's what's meaningless is our folly. It's thinking that we're all that smart. Thinking that we're outsmarting God. Thinking that we have the answers when we're actually just the question. So, any comments about this? Any additional comments? I hope I've made you think of it a little differently look at things a little differently and how we do this. It's kind of fun, though. Solomon was wise, and the Bible is wise. This is the answer book. No matter what the question is, the answer is in here. And that's what we Christians have that no other religion has. Is the questions come up, here's the answer. And boy, does that bother some people. That does bother. What do you mean dust? Yep, I mean dust. I mean carbon-based life forms. Any other comments? Okay. Greg, would you dismiss us, please?
Heavenly Father, we want to thank you, God, so much for allowing us to have a place like this gathered together as a church. God, to be able to worship and praise you in so many ways. And we really thank you for allowing Peg to be able to come in and bring this message to us. Lord, to be able to dwell in your word. The King Solomon brought to us on this and how life can get a little hectic at times, but we do know that we need to turn to God, and He's the most important part of it no matter what. Even in those weary times of hope. We just thank you so much for that. Like Ted said, we just pray that we see each and every day how thankful we are that we have the hope of eternal salvation that you've given us, God. We know you died for us and you rose again, and that you're giving us that option to be able to just spend that eternal life with you. We just thank you so much for all of it. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
What's that?